Earlier in the show, we looked at opening more trade with neighboring countries and what effect that could have on our food supply. One curveball in changing our trading practices is Cuba. Now, of course, we've looked extensively at that here on TWILA, but recent changes have opened up the island nation in ways we've not seen since before the embargo. Joining us now is TWILA's Neil Melancon with this week's Bottom Line, and part of that change is right there in your hand, and it is one of my absolute favorites.
Well, Avery, it's not just one of your favorites. It's favorites of a lot of people. Rum and, of course, cigars being some of the most popular exports Cuba has to offer the United States. Recent changes by the Obama administration have made it a lot easier to bring in both this and cigars in the United States. And, of course, rum and cigars are some of the most popular trade, and they're agricultural products that have gotten a lot of attention. But there are some other changes that affect how we trade with Cuba. So I'm going to run down a list of 3 of the biggest changes that have happened recently. Now keep in mind, these have all happened within a month, so the situation is extremely fluid. First up, of course, is the travel restrictions of only allowing $100 worth of rum and cigars travelers could carry back. Now you can bring back all that you can carry. That may seem small, and relative to the amount of goods out there, it is. But the big deal there is it makes it more attractive to tourists going to the country and spending more money there. That's going to mean wealth for a country hobbled by communist practices and the embargo. That's important because, 2, there are changes to financing for agricultural inputs such as fertilizers and chemicals. The big change is the way U.S. companies can now extend credit into Cuba. Now, there are no restrictions on it, which means more cash flow into Cuba. The more money they have means more money to buy our products. There's a problem, and that is there are still restrictions on directly selling ag products into Cuba. This can't be changed without congressional action. Finally, before now, U.S. ships going to Cuba could not return to the U.S. for 6 months. Certainly, shipping companies were finding creative ways to get around that rule, but it was red tape interfering with traffic overall. The bottom line is we're moving closer to trade with Cuba every single day. The most important aspect of these changes, I think, is the snowball effect these changes are having. Momentum is definitely pushing towards opening Cuba up for full trade, and after the election would be a prime time to do it. It's probably a good thing that we're stalled a bit right now, as we still need to work out some of the details of issues such as how to protect our sugar growers in Louisiana from Cuba dumping it and our markets. And Avery, of course, you've been to Cuba twice now. Tell me what you think about, are we pushing closer, do you think, to that full trade with Cuba?
I think we're seeing the first openings here, but I think we still have a little bit of a ways to go. And with these little incremental changes, I think the next logical step is going to be something already before Congress, and that's the Crawford Act. Congressman Rick Crawford out of Arkansas is the author of that bill. Congressman Ralph Abraham of Louisiana, one of the major supporters of that bill, and that is kind of surgical in what it does. It would open up financing for agricultural items so that we would be able to sell rice, and instead of having to have cash on hand, which is what they currently do with Cuba. Cuba has to be able to pay cash for what they get. This would allow banks to finance it, offer them credit, extend credit to Cuba, and that's going to help our farmers too. So I think that's where we're going to see the next opening, but it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think it's going to happen until after the elections.
Certainly, and I think when you have things like that pass, and you get more businesses that are dependent on trade with Cuba, then you get more legislative pressure to open up that trade even further.
Now, if only President Obama had relaxed the restrictions before my last trip, I'd have been able to bring back more Havana Club.
More of that. This is 7-year rum. It's really good.
Yeah, it's really tasty. I only have that much left. Thank you very much, Neil Melancon. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Next week, the TWILA team will be at a staff retreat, so we will be out. However, when we return, Carl Wiggers will have his final installment of the series, Patently Louisiana. Until then, you can catch up on all of our stories online at twilatv.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll still be active there. For all of us here at TWILA, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again right here in a couple of weeks.